Levitha, an islet in the middle of the Aegean Sea. The South Aegean Sea is one of the most beautiful geographical locations on our planet. 5,000 years of human settlements, Minoan, Mycenaean civilizations in Crete, Rhodes, Santorini, Cyclades Islands, and so on. But no one would expect such a small islet to be part of these ancient civilizations. And even in our age, when humans are more and more willing to get clustered in metropolitan cities, such an islet could be home to a 4-people family. Yes, just one family lives on this tiny island. The family of Melonis, who claims that his family has occupied the island for at least 8 generations. But before I tell you more about this extraordinary family, let me share with you the dimensions of this island first. The longitudinal size of the islet is about 6 kilometers, and the latitudinal size is even less. That is to say, one can walk from the south coast to the north coast in just 10 minutes. So what does Melonis' family do on this islet? They rent moorings to sailing yachts. They have 14 moorings in total. The islet is almost in the midway between Dodechanesian and Cyclades Islands. The distance of the island to Amorgos is about 20 nautical miles, and to Kalymnos it's also the same, about 20 nautical miles. Levitha's position is unique in the Aegean Sea. It is located in the middle of what yachtsmen call the Aegean Channel, the predominant northwest wind, which is called as Meltemi by the locals, builds huge and constricted waves when it blows over Seven Beaufort, which makes sailors shun from crossing the channel. So Levitha's and the neighboring islet's exceptional position provides a good shelter in the midway of the channel. You just pay €7 for using any of these moorings, which are suitable for yachts up to 17 meters. So what else does Melonis' family occupy themselves with in this small desert islet? Well, they cultivate a large piece of land in the middle of the islet. They do fishing. They occasionally go to Patmos for amenities, and their children go to school in Patmos. They grow sheep and goats. They produce milk, cheese, and meat. And they also run a restaurant for yachtsmen. They generate their own electricity from wind and sunlight. Melonis explains that their total source was about 4 kilowatts. They obtain fresh water from the well. But Melonis says neither fresh water nor electricity is sufficient, and that they bring sometimes fresh water from neighboring islands. They do have satellite connection to the internet. So what makes this family choose such a difficult life on an islet, at least 4 hours away from basic education and medical services, and much farther away from city life? Melonis and his family also remind us the dichotomy between peasantry and farmer in its simplistic sense. The members of this family are quite well educated, speaking many languages, including English and Italian. On this island with limited means, they engineer their life down to the smallest detail with great precision. One can even say, scientifically. So having such well-developed intellectual brains, how come that they are not looking for more diversity around more people to interact with? How come that they don't feel alone or constrained? Is there something in their lifestyle that transcends the limits of their islet and their individuality towards universalist concerns? To make sense of their mindset, one may suggest to use the solipsist period in the philosophy of enlightenment, after the Cartesian Revolution versus the 19th century German phenomenological hermeneutical school, namely the 3H, Hegel, Husserl, and Heidegger. After the Cartesian Revolution till the 19th century, the predominant questions in the history of philosophy were epistemological, which means, how can I know something? Where me is portrayed as the knowing subject, as opposed to the outside physical world. This solipsism has undermined the ontological conditions of other conscious subjects and how others determine my subjectification as res cogitans. Here we would suggest that the motivation of the ordinary modern citizens, which stands for us, for living in cosmopolitan cities in full cultural, economical diversities, relies upon this solipsist state of mind. The cosmopolitan individual embodies a paradox. He can never be certain of his identity through his economic and cultural activities in the metropolitan world, while this environmental diversity is also the source of a sense of freedom. The anonymity of the metropolitan individual is also related to his independence and freedom. By contrast, the Dasein concept in Heidegger, which means being there, or the presence of the individual within or always in between its time and space, does not need an anonymity for feeling free. In Heidegger's formulation, this anonymity, which makes us feel free, is substituted by the authenticity of the subject. The metropolitan subject throws himself into cosmopolitan anonymity where he feels independent. By contrast, the authentic subject bears the awareness of being primordially thrown into the world and deliberately chooses not to be free of that environment. He builds up his authenticity through the pathways as he moves, uses the same pathways and opens new ones, caring and appropriating his environment. As Sartre formulates this authentic act, we are condemned to be free as we are thrown into the world, being responsible for everything we do. This philosophical formula also distinguishes the two distinct sociological entities, the peasant and the farmer. A typical peasant seeks to run away from village under the rule of master and goes to the city to seek freedom in metropolitan anonymity. The farmer, by contrast, claims, adopts, and protects his land. There is an often pronounced argument about how such small islands in the Aegean Sea are kept residential by the Greek farmers. It is claimed that the Greek government supports and deploys Greek farmers to live on such islets just for the sake of enlarging Greek national waters in the Aegean Sea. However, Melonis tells a very different story. According to what Melonis tells us, the Samaras Papandreou government in 2011 had planned to build wind generators in these islets, including the land cultivated by Melonis, without even asking for permission, paying a rent or offering a share from the electricity that was supposed to be generated. The government and the private company cooperation were obviously ignoring the Melonis family, their farm, their 200 years of settlement and materialized labor on the island, with the consideration that the islet had a non-residential reef status. In order to stop the usurpation, Melonis sued the government, collecting the documents and the proofs about his family's 200 years of settlement on the island, such as tax receipts and records, pictures, testimonies, and so on. But as the judicial network was influenced by the government, his legal attempts remained ineffective. He had finally written a complaint petition to the army, telling that the island was of great geostrategical importance for Greek national interests as it is located in the middle of the Aegean Channel. And only then after that it came to mind that, we have a farmer living there, on that small islet, so Greece should endorse him. So the army put pressure on the government and the court, and Milanese won the case. So what happened here corresponds exactly to the term often used by the narrow-minded neoliberals, liberal leftists, and anarchists in Turkey. The military tutelage, but this time not in Turkey, in Greece. Wow, who brought all these stones? Do you see the pathways? The stones are collected aside to open pathways. So there is a logic behind the Heideggerian design. Now let's remember Voltaire's motto in Candide to better understand this concept of Heidegger. There is no such a stupid thing like that we live in the best possible world. Any intelligent design in nature and so on. We must cultivate our garden. When you cultivate somewhere, that means you colonize that place. This was the proclamation of the astronaut who was left on the planet Mars, cultivating potatoes on the Martian soil, in the film, The Martian. So why did Robinson Crusoe want to go back to his island after finally having made it to England? That motif of Crusoe was the most critical part of that novel. Again, in Heideggerian terms, Crusoe was thrown there and was there. He experienced the Dasein through cultivating the island. Islands are perfect places for inducing dreams of possession of land through cultivation and colonization. A renowned example of a novel for this is Thomas More's Utopia. The naming, the symbolic term of the novel, bears already the self-contradictory nature of the fantasy of colonizing, as to cope with the reality of being thrown. The non-existent place. That means we have never been thrown in a friendly environment. The utopia is always a fantasy. Wow! Here we come up with the famous proclamation of one of the greatest minds of human civilization, who is the Professor Zizek. He says, there is no such thing we call as nature, with attributes like caring, motherhood, and so on. If there were such a thing as nature, what a bitch would it be, so that she destroyed all her offspring, such as dinosaurs and so on, for multiple times, so that we burn them as fossil fuels. So the care is not something that is pre-existing in the outer world. There is not any source of care that is extraneous to us. There is no big other. The care is ours. So far, we studied the two interrelated concepts, the cultivation and the colonization, with regard to our observation on Levitha Island and questioning the mental structure of the Melonis family. Cultivation and colonization are both the definitive and structural elements for the logic of the Heideggerian Dasein. So from here we can now move on to the third element, which is nostos. Nostos does not simply mean returning home, but it also connotates a heroism in this very return, a recovery of reputation and the regaining of identity. Pioneering is closely related to this heroism. Again, while thinking on Melonis family, about why do they choose such a life on this small island, one must also consider the heroic perspective in the notion of pioneering itself. So why did Amundsen travel to the South Pole? Why did humans ever go to the moon? All geographical and astronomical explorations bear some logic about finding somewhere new to cultivate, to colonize, or simply to build a new home. Nostos is therefore a heroic act. The story which exemplifies this logic at its best is Odyssea. The Trojan War took 10 years. The return of Odysseus to home took also an additional 10 years. We know that he was not in such a hurry for return, while he was always pretending that he was missing his wife and home. For Odysseus, the discovery, observation, and experience of a new place was even more important than being on the right and shortest way leading home. And we also know how tragic were the ends of all his colleagues, including Agamemnon, Menelaus, Ayşegül, all of whom were not pretending but really suffering of real homesickness. So the last scene in his palace in Ithaca, shooting arrows, first going through the axis, then the next hitting one of the traitors. This heroism was the logical consequence of his expedition and pioneering. Let's think about the family of Melonis again throughout this last scene. This is the restaurant of Mr. Melonis, where all yachtsmen, sailing friends, and families are gathered in the evening for dinner. Italians, Turks, Germans, French, even Russians. There are so many flags in the moorings, as many nationalities as 14 boats. So you see Mr. Melonis serving the tables? He is right there, between the tables, being there,